If I can be heard, give me a 4. Do something a little different. This is a hard link to a video that I'm about to play. To set it off, I want to give all Prince, his Mashiach, Hoshua ben Yosef, as well as to the Ruach HaKodesh, for their contributions, the reading of the Haftorah, as well as the offering that M70 just made, and his reading of the Parsha, Torah Rabbah. I want to present this here. In light of what M70 just presented, the alignments, again, are always profound. I want to take us back a little bit, present this video. Here we go. Mine's taking a little while to load, so give me a moment. But as it does load, play. Don't know what's taking mine so long. Let's try this one more time. Shabbat Shalom and welcome to all who have chosen on this day to fellowship with us today in Hebrew Vision. Where Yah is Elohim, Yahushua is Mashiach. Torah Rabbah for choosing to fellowship with us on this fine day. We hope to hear from you as well again after the class. Here we go. Let's get this started. Here we go.
Your cities, for all intents and purposes, have declared open season on black bags. However, a small resistance is forming. Both Terminator X and Chuck D have resurfaced. Mobile rebel unit, the Valley of the GPs. Chuck D is on his way to a closed-door press conference. Terminator X will be tapping into the government-controlled and decoding the message to all public enemy rebel bases.
Let's go ahead and stop that. Are at war. The name of this presentation, as Sister Soldier so eloquently stated. For some reason my keyboard isn't working. If I can be heard, give me a 4. There we go. Make sure this is working for everybody. We are at war. But there's more to it than that. This is the name of this lesson today. How revolutionary love overcomes imperialist hate. So I'm transitioning from the idea and the concept of the orders, the priestly orders of Melchizedek and Lewi, to now dealing with some current events. I want to frame some things presently, historically, as relates to our reality in the diaspora. And it pains my heart to see so much suffering. And we have to honestly take responsibility for that we are experiencing due to the disobedience and the lack of repentance and returning to Yah that we have not undertaken. But we know that Deuteronomy talks about our enemies will be merciless against the young, the old, the male, the female. In this first presentation here, this first article that I want to present to us comes to us from the Atlanta Star, Black Star. It talks about the black female victims who were suspended from school. They were victims of sexual assault, but they to sing and dance for a safe space. When you access that article, please give me a 4. We are at war, people. And this is internationally. You can look at Papua New Guinea. You can look at Brazil. You can look in Chicago. We're at war with ourselves. But there is a full scale against those who are classified as black. Again, black female victims of sexual assault suspended from school, some forced to sing and dance for safe space, attorney says. This is written on June 14th by a Tanasia Kinney. A Brooklyn-based attorney is calling for an investigation into New York City schools after their mishandling of a number of cases involving the sexual assaults of black female students. Now, what is so crucial about this is that the woman in our society, and even in Israelite culture, and throughout African culture, is the barometer and the thermostat for our social climate. As the woman goes, so does society. And we have to understand that there is a crucial role that women play in society. And as men, it is our responsibility and our duty and obligation, our divine calling even, to protect our women And we're seeing so many assaults, so many women missing, so many injustices, mishandlings of the more tender and more gentle and subtle species of humanity, the woman. According to the HuffPost, attorney Kerry Goldberg, interesting name, wants the Education Department and U.S. Department of Justice to launch a joint investigation into the school system after 3 female students who reported their sexual assaults were suspended from school. They reported their assault. I got assaulted, but I got suspended. What sense does that make? So we can see the injustice that is taking place throughout this situation. Goldberg asserts that the school's response to the incidents is clear proof of the system's racial and gender discrimination. So to be a black woman is in this society, a double threat. You are threatened on a double scale to be a black woman, racial and gender. Okay, racially and gender wise. Goldberg submitted her initial complaint with U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights in November of 2015, followed by another one in April, and the latest on June 4. The HuffPost reports the publication obtained edited copies of the attorney's complaints along with several pages of evidence. According to one complaint, a 15-year-old student attending the teacher's preparatory school was forced to perform oral sex on two males in a stairway, while 5 others stood and watched. The New York Times reports that the girl was developmentally delayed with an IQ of about 71. The female student later reported her assault to a school guidance counselor after one of the boys informed her that she would have to perform the sex act again. Rather than sympathizing with the student, the school opted to suspend her after they deemed the sex consensual, the complaint states. This unjust, completely unjust. The behavior constitutes a danger to the health, safety, welfare, and morals of your child and others at school. A letter to the girl's parents obtained by the HuffPost read. The complaint also revealed that the reason school officials pursued out-of-school suspension was because the NYPD failed to arrest anyone for the heinous assault. In a separate case involving an 8th grader at a middle school, 584, a female student was punched in the genitals by a boy, after which she was dry humped and slapped across the face by another male. The complaint details the school suspended the perpetrator for a month, and after his return to school, the female victim was forced to sit in 3 classes, a lunch period, and gym with her attacker. Harassment, intimidation, right? These are all things that Scripture speaks of, though, that would happen to the children of Israel. And it has been continuous for the past 2,000 plus years. The girl's parents tried to have her transferred to McKinney School of the Arts, but an audition was required for admittance. They had the survival of sexual assault literally do a song and dance in order to attend a safe school, the Huffington Post reports. The student completed the audition, still was not admitted to the school. According to her parents' court filing, it took over a month to get the girl into a new school. In the 3rd complaint, an 8th grader, and these are young children, an 8th grader at Spring Creek Community School reported that she had been sodomized. She informed her principal that a video of the assault was making its rounds among students, after which the principal suggested she transfer schools to avoid being and humiliated, the complaint states. Why don't you just transfer instead of, dealing with this matter lawfully? You see, this is the justice that we face in America. It was the most awful thing, the girl told BuzzFeed, who first reported her story. It was bad enough that everyone knew what happened, but now that they had seen the video, much worse. Knowing that they had seen it is that much worse. Exactly, Brother Zion. Yeah, that's what's truly required. The 13-year-old also expressed the overwhelming amount of pressure she felt as classmates blamed her for not putting up enough of a fight to ward off her attacker. They said, I allowed it to happen to me, she explained, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Everyone was blaming things on me, the young student confirmed. It was so much pressure I couldn't take it. At times I felt like giving up on life. Goldberg blamed racism, sexism, and classism for the poor handling of the cases involving the 3 girls. Teenage black girls are sexualized in society in a way that white girls are not, she told the HuffPost. In these cases, there was no doubt the sex happened. No belief the girls were making up their whole stories. There was ample proof this happened. What was being disbelieved or not, it was consensual. Goldberg also pointed out that her clients were never educated on their Title IX rights after suffering such sexual violence. Hasn't said much of Post reports. Our legal team is reviewing these deeply troubling complaints and will respond to the Office for Civil Rights regarding any pending matters, spokeswoman Toya Holness told the publication. So we are at war. They're attacking our women, they're attacking our children, they're shooting our males in the street in cold blood. There's so much madness that is going on, particularly as relates to the diaspora in North America. Yesterday marked the 1 year anniversary of the shooting at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. To continue this assault that we're under and suffering from without anything. This is Jelani Cobb in the New Yorker writing an article entitled The Hate That Remains a Year After Charleston. Keeping in mind, yes, we are at war. If you access this article, please give me a 4. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and start 2 or more. We can get it started. In February 1896, the former Confederate General Bradley T. Johnson addressed the Ladies' Memorial Association of Richmond, Virginia, which was dedicating the former White House of the Confederacy as the treasure house of the Confederate history and relics. Historian David Blight recounts the moment in Race and Reunion, his history, published in 2001, of the ways the Civil War has been remembered. Blight writes, Johnson boldly declared that the South did not make war in defense of slavery. Slavery was only the incident, the point attacked. And the attack had been that of the free mobocracy of the North against a slave democracy of the South. End quote. It would be easy to see Johnson's speech as the antique reasoning of a white-suited relic, were this thinking not so easily accepted in our own times. Let's see. This is the article, Elder, here. Try that one more time. A year ago this week, 9 African American worshipers were slain in Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, on a street named for John C. Calhoun, the intellectual godfather of the racist secessionist cause. The 22-year-old charged with these murders held the Confederate cause as sovereign and right. He thought of his actions as those of a stalwart in the defense of white freedom at a time when it was imperiled, according to a manifesto that was found online. This is the hallmark of it came up in mine, Ella. Let me try with this here. Let me see. This is the hallmark, however, of the Western imperialist assault against African peoples. Continuing on. He now faces 2 death penalty trials, one of them in the state of South Carolina, which has an Indian American governor and an African American senator, and the other on federal charges in a country with an African American attorney general who was appointed by an African American president. And we touched on this several times as far as the misleadership class of these people of color who do not truly represent the interests or the well-being of those who are their skin folks, so to speak. Not that that should truly matter. We know humanity is humanity, but we have to understand that when we look at ethnicity, there is a tendency of ethnic groups to stick together. Okay, we know this here. However, when we look at our ethnic group, we do not see that unity, unfortunately. Continuing in the days following the massacre, Dylan Roof and the ideology of hate that inspired him were denounced from every corner of American society. Governor Nikki Haley announced the removal of the Confederate flag from the grounds of the state capitol, which doesn't really mean anything. Jenny Horn, a Republican state representative and a descendant of the Confederate President Jefferson Davis, delivered an indictment of the flag as a symbol of hate in a speech that pushed her peers to vote in favor of removal. A week after the shootings, amid the paralyzing heat of summer in Charleston, President Obama delivered a eulogy for Clementa Pinckney, the pastor of Emmanuel AME, who died in the attack on that sanctuary. In a masterstroke of sympathetic understanding, Obama led all those gathered at the College of Charleston in the hymn Amazing Grace, which is a debacle, to be honest with you, understanding the author of the song, or the writer of the song Amazing Grace, who was a slave trader himself, and realized his mortality on a trip pirating bodies from the west coast of Africa to some other point in the Triangle Trade. On July 10, 2015, the Confederate flag was removed from the state's Capitol grounds. It means nothing. We understand Charleston rightly as part of a cascade of violence that defines the times we live in. 9 more lives offered as tribute before a sacred ideal of a well-regulated militia, which we have continually faced and suffered under the jurisdiction of, so to speak. To the extent that we see Dylan Roof as a symbol of anything, it is of what happens to a heart colonized by hate. This is the hate that we speak of. But to accept this idea would mean we've learned precisely nothing from the abomination that transpired that night last June. Bradley Johnson's speech 120 years ago wasn't about a lost cause. It was about one that had been found, the cause of self-exoneration, righteous victimhood, and a tacit racial contempt. Dylan Roof remains in the custody of the state, but the principles for which his actions are the logical conclusion remain vital and incendiary. It's easy to forget that the film The Birth of a Nation was released in 1915 not simply as a paean to the Ku Klux Klan, but as a means of marking the 50th anniversary of the conclusion of the Civil War, and proposing that the shared victims of white Americans, North and South, could become the basis for national reunification. So you can see the unification of the imperialist paradigm, white supremacy, point blank, being unified on a much more strong and principled basis. Whereas you look at our reality, more and more division. Well, we need that. We know that Yah always works with remnants. We can look at Gideon, but at the same time, we need to ensure our unity. That is where our power lies. It is perhaps not coincidence that the murders in Charleston occurred in the year that marked the 150th anniversary of the war's conclusion. Roof's actions brought about no racial reconciliation, save for the unanimity of the denunciations, but that is only part of the story. You can denounce something verbally, but what are your actions demonstrating? Because we know that there are more people in America who do hold the same sentiments as the Devil's Hoof or Dylan Roof. 8 months after Charleston, and despite Haley's endorsements of Marco Rubio, Donald Trump won the South Carolina Republican primary. The scarcely concealed themes of white supremacy within his campaign coexist easily with the inverted narratives of victimhood and innocence that are the cornerstone of a demagogic American tradition. This is going to happen to them. They're going to realize that, just like they're going to realize what it says in also, I believe it's the Wisdom of Solomon, 5th chapter. You know, we've been doing this against the sons of the Most High. So a century after the birth of a nation, a New Yorker whose rallies teeter on the edge of Bedlam and whose rhetoric deploys a nearly ecumenical contempt for non-white Americans seems bent upon proving that D.W. Griffith had a point. This weekend, the Emmanuel AME Church will be hosting prayer services honoring the 9 victims. On Saturday, there will be a March for Unity, a march. This is the mobilization and reactionary matters that we do, as opposed to truly organizing and seeking to transform or even dismantle systems. Marching is not going to do anything. Now, unless we march out of this country, that's what's going to really do some things. But as far as just protests and marches and things of that nature, that's not doing any systemic change or systematic change. So that this march will occur on a day when some of the victims of another mass shooting, those who died in the Post nightclub in Orlando, Florida, will be laid to rest is a bitter counterpoint. But so is another fact, much closer to home. The South Carolina legislature removed the Confederate flag from its grounds nearly a year ago. On the opposite side of the state house from where the flag stood is a monument to Strom Thurmond, the late senator who ran for president on a single-issue segregationist ticket in '48. Near Thurmond's monument is a marker recognizing J. Marion Sims, the pioneering gynecologist who conducted medical experiments on enslaved black women. A third monument memorializes Pitchfork Ben Tillman, the former South Carolina governor who proudly spoke of his experience lynching African Americans. The problem a year after the horror is not what was taken down, it's what was left standing. We can see that there is nothing but pure and unbridled hate that remains in this imperialist construct that we call America. Now, in light of all of the hardships and the woes and the suffering and turmoil and poverty and unemployment in this unity that we face, it would seem likely that we as quote unquote African Americans would have more of an eye pointed or looking in the direction of our mother continent. But this 2013 article actually states otherwise. It comes to us from Urban Intellectuals. The name of the article by Mark Young is entitled, Why Are African Americans So Uninterested in Africa When It Is Still the Crown Jewel of the World's Eye? Why do African Americans pay no heed to the continent to which they owe their birth, their ancestry? Well, let's get some more fours. Hallelujah for that post. I found that very provoking, thought provoking to say the least, and provoking in other ways as well. For the need to organize and the need for us to understand what we are to do. So the call that M70 made just a short while ago is imperative. If we're not about doing for self and ensuring our survival and our even prosperity, and I don't mean that in just a material sense, but for us to experience the blessings that Yah has told would come to us in obedience, well, we need to organize for that. And we need to look to the continent of Africa. In Northeast Africa, more especially and specifically in a land known as milk and honey, or holy, or the promised one. Compared to other races that live in America, does the African American community display the same level of cultural connection and pride toward Africa that other races such as Asian, European, and Latinos display toward their historic homelands? Give me 1 second. I had a pop up come up. I gotta get this pop up off. There are a few points to consider in the analysis to answer this question and to develop an understanding of why we do not develop the connection today with all the information about the rich history of Africa at our disposal. First, we must consider whether this is a race issue or a nationality issue. Danielle, it seems as if every time we bring up Africa, this is a response that you want to erroneously bring up. We are Natufian at root, which is Bantu at root. Adam came from a people who are African. The Afro-Asiatic languages are Black African people who spoke in a dialect that was classified as Afro-Asiatic or Hemito Shemitic. Okay. In fact, it is stated that uh, the people of Judea look like black Africans. Why? Because they are black Africans. I digress. In my opinion, this is much more of a nationality issue than a racial one. We tend to look at it as a race issue because of skin color, but most displays of cultural and historic connection to a motherland are in context of a nation and its nationality, not a continent and its various peoples. Asians are not in touch with Asian history and culture as a whole. They are in touch with their individual nationality. Japanese people are proud and connected to Japan and its heritage and culture. Yes, indeed, we are. So are Chinese in China with China, Italians with Rome, Greeks with Greece, Egyptians with Egypt, and Mexicans with Mexico. If Israel is on the continent of Africa, that makes us continentally an African people. Okay? Are we Hamitic? No, we are not Hamitic. We are Shemitic, but even Shemitic people are African people because they are on the African continent. That is ethnically speaking. But no matter where you are, as Peter Tosh said, if you're a black man, you're an African. No matter where you are. All of humanity comes from South Africa, brother. Everyone on earth, Hebrews included, come from either a Bantu, a Twa, or a Khoisan root. We, as Israelites, come from the Bantu root of humanity, which went into the Levant as the Natufian people. These were Africans. Know your history, my brother. Continuing going. For African Americans, there is no connectivity to an actual country. And this is why I'm talking about revolutionary love. How this overcomes imperialist hate, because we are so separated. Didn't I just say we're from Shem? Didn't I just say that? Somebody red dot this brother, please. You need to listen, okay, right now. Yes, you have questions. Hold those questions, but red dot him and listen. Okay, I just stated we're from Shem. For African Americans, there is no connectivity to an actual country in Africa because it's an entire continent. So, because of the destruction of our lineage and national history through slavery, we have no natural inherent connection to African beyond skin color. It follows that because we do not know whether our ancestors come from Uganda, Nigeria, Sudan, or Somalia, there is and will continue to be a disconnect among most African Americans. There also exists a huge language barrier, as there is no language connection between African Americans and Africa. Africa is home to many and the most languages on one continent, and dialects, and the fact that our elders, grandparents, great grandparents, and even further back did not speak our native African tongues to carry down to new generations furthered than that disconnect. Now, again, Hebrew is an Afro-Asiatic language. Okay? The key word to that is Afro, African, Hamito-Shemitic. This is spoken by both Hamites and Shemites. Okay, you can look, this map was going to show it very clearly. Just below, you can see the Afro-Asiatic languages of Berber, Arabic, Songhay, Hausa, Amharic, Oromo. Not, those are just some of them. Hebrew is a part of those languages. Okay, so we share connections, huge connections with African people. And as a matter of fact, we are more connected to Africa than any other continent that there is as Israelites. Even when you go into Mesopotamia, that's Africa. That's the African tectonic plates over there. Other nationalities that have stronger cultural and historic connections often have the language of their native land spoken in and around them by elders and parents, even if they themselves don't speak their native language. That spoken word helps to build an interest and cultural pride in your homeland and its customs and traditions. Africa is also a mixture of many different cultures and dichotomies, Christian and Muslim turmoil, tribal differences, Arab Africans, white Africans, and black Africans. This, I think, makes it difficult for African Americans to find their historic place in proper context in a place as vast and complex as Africa and then relate it to our current American experience. We were sold because of our disobedience, as scripture told us in Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26. Lastly, none of this is to say that you cannot learn and benefit from all there is to know about Africa, but learning about Africa is a historic sense is different from the inherent natural connections we are discussing in comparison to other people and why African Americans may have limited interest in learning about Africa. While most African Americans, I think, have a spiritual connection to Africa, and that we have a special love and admiration the continent as a whole, or for the continent as a whole, that feeling does not always translate in a physical nature of desiring to learn everything about Africa, and here's the key, or having the desire to return to the continent to consummate the historic bond between us. Yesterday, my brother from another mother posted on one of the social media outlets that he and his family had just experienced their 8th year in the North African land of Israel. That is what I would call the consummation of that particular matter. He consummated his connection to Africa by returning home and establishing his domicile there. He has reclaimed his heritage. He's reclaimed his homeland, as many others in this room as I speak have also done as well, to show their revolutionary consciousness. Okay? Their steps toward overcoming this imperialist hate and war that we are in. And again, this is called We Are at War, how revolutionary love overcomes imperialist hate. But see, the thing is, when you look at all that, you have Kush and you have Indus Kush. Zerubbabel. Those are still African people. Kush or Nimrod was in Shinar. And Shinar was colonized and first established by African people. Guess where Abraham was? In that same land, in Ur of Chaldea. Okay, so he was of those people. He was of those people. Okay. Noah, the father of them all, there's a relation. And it's like people completely ignore the relation between Shem and Ham, and even Yafet. Danielle, I have a few more articles, my brother, so just hold your thought. Make sure you write it down or something, because I want to continue and finish my offering before we have any segues. So if you have a question after, please bring it up, and I would love to hear your voice. But again, what is deep, as Noble Wade was talking about, this colonization, this mental colonization that we suffer from is truly devastating to our reality, to our perception, as M70 said, of who our allies are and who our enemies are. This article just is a witness to that. It is from the African Globe. It is entitled "Shameful. Africans are asking their enemies to fund their armies." What kind of misperceptions do they have as relates to that? This was written on June 14th. It's in Africa, Jonathan. Some would call it the Middle East, but you have to understand the political division of that land called the Middle East, because at one point in time that was known as Africa. Yes, indeed, Zerubbabel, that is an undeniable statement. We share more affinities with African people, culturally speaking, very much so. And even when you look at like the Limba, when you look at the Yahuyadaya, when you look at the Biafrans, when you look at the Ashanti, when you look at the Igbo, and you look at all of the empires in West Africa, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart from the Africans that were indigenous to those lands. When you look at the Africans in Sudan, when you look at these people, all of this is almost indistinguishable. We are indistinguishable from indigenous Israelites who are African there to the diaspora where Africans are also found. They share the same lands. They share the exact same lands. Yes, indeed. So let's get this article. The African Union is reaching out to Gulf countries to support its peacekeeping mission in Somalia after the European reduced its annual $200 million funding by 20%. The AU is also working with the United Nations Security Council to find alternative funding for the African Union mission in Somalia. The head of AMISOM, Francisco Cetino Madeira, said AU Commissioner for Peace and Security Smail Chergui has visited countries in the Gulf to try to fill the funding gaps. Now, let's keep in mind, Gulf states, Arabs, these light-skinned Arabs, not African Arab, not the original Arab, but these mixed breed Arabs, still call us slaves. So much so that, again, a minister in Egypt called African people, and this is lumped up no matter what Shemitic blood you may have. If you black, you are an African in their eyes. But he said that we are still slaves and dogs. Osama bin Laden called African people slaves. They were the first colonizers of the African continent. So now you see the AU going to these enemies and seeking to receive funding and assistance from them. All the way up to the Red Sea, all the way up into the Mediterranean. Continuing on this article, new strategy comes after Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta threatened to withdraw the country's forces from Somalia because the international community is not providing sufficient funding and equipment to sustain the war against al-Shabaab, which is being funded like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, which are all fronts, like al-Nusra, by Western imperialist forces. Neocolonialism. This is what we have to understand. They're all being funded by these European countries and governments. While hosting diplomats from the UN Security Council in mid-May, President Kenyatta said the gap left by the EU 20% cut is too large to be met by troop contributing countries. In April, Uganda's Parliamentary Committee of Defense and Internal Affairs raised similar concerns over the cut in funding, delays of up to 4 months in releasing the pay, and non-compensation for use of military hardware. Mr. Madeira said AMSOM has been operating with a shortage of equipment, arms, and ammunition, and that the soldiers are being paid stipends that are not commensurate with the efforts and sacrifices they are undertaking. He said ending the conflict in Somalia should be a collective effort by the international community. Well, the international community is responsible for starting this fire. Now, they may want to come to the rescue and pretend as if they are those who are, the heroes of the matter. But their interest is in to keep this struggle, this strife going so that they can seize the resources of the land. And so we have to understand this huge dynamic of class struggle. And the way that we overcome class struggle is through cultural revolution. And so when we look at countries like China, who was at one point in time considered the sick man of Asia, the entire country, for the Opium War that they had to fight with the British in order to get them off their back, the Chinese went from, again, the sick man of Asia to being a superpower under Mao Zedong by undergoing a cultural revolution. We have to study and analyze history to understand this matter. They closed their doors to all outsiders. They started to study their history. They started to practice their culture. They embraced their identity, their nationality, their traditions, their values, their mores and morals. And they built themselves up to now become, if not the most powerful nation that there is on earth, with their billion-plus population and their cultural consciousness. I'm not saying they're not, but what they have done as an example of going from the bottom to the top is truly commendable. Now, they some heathens as I don't know what, but you have to admire what they have done. African Hebrews like Ben Ami from Chicago. Yeah, but before he and his ancestors were in Chicago, where were they? Before they had to leave Chicago, how did they get to Chicago? How did they get to America? How did we get to America? Where were we when we were brought to America? Where did they take us from? And how long had we been there prior to them taking us? This is what you got to think about. I'm going to get into this particular article here. Again, African Cultural Revolution and Class Struggle. This is from the All African People's Revolutionary Party page. We just had an interview with the Pan-African cadre member of the AAPRP on our talk show, Hebrew Vision Live, which you can actually get at our website, Hebrew Vision Live on Spreaker.com or Hebrew Vision on Spreaker.com. I'll post that in there after I'm done. But let's get to this article. When some people think of culture, the discussion often focuses only on cultural expressions or customs. Examples of cultural expression may include styles of dress, food, music, and language, amongst other things. But when we talk about culture in the full sense, we must talk first and foremost about cultural values. We cannot truly understand culture nor use it as a positive force for for transformation of our real life conditions without understanding the cultural values, both positive and negative, that influence behavior and activity. This is where the revolutionary love comes in. We got to have love for African people. We got to have love even for some Europeans. We're not against that. We're against wickedness. We're against darkness. We're against, when I say darkness, that means things that are done in the dark, the wickedness. We're against injustice. We're against unrighteousness. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities. This is what we have to understand. This is the revolutionary love of which I speak in the name of this particular offering that will overcome imperialist hate. These are the divisions that they create in order to keep us divided and not united. Oh, I'm not Hamitic, I'm Shemitic. They don't care about that. They're going to pop you the same, incarcerate you the same, or straight marginalize and disenfranchise you all the same, no matter what your ethnic identity may be or your nationality is. If you a nigga in their eyes. You are African. Exactly. So it would behoove us to understand we need to find some points of similarity with these people, as Malcolm was talking about, and unite to overthrow this stuff, to get this big monkey off our back. Let's get this article continuing on. Cultural values define how children interact with adults, how adults interact with children, how people socialize, how people use their free time, how people make a living, what is given priority in the lives of individuals and the community. Culture itself is simply a product of the ongoing activities of human beings slash communities and their interaction with nature slash environment as well as with one another. And this is where Israel's role in Pan-Africanism is so crucial, because what we provide is something that no other nation can provide, which is a spiritual dimension and a moral paradigm that will allow an ethically and an upright society to come into existence, more so than any other society. And on top of that, the most significant contribution that we will bring to Pan-Africanism is the reality of the manifest presence of the creator of heaven, earth, sea, and all that is in them. And that is our responsibility. That is our burden to bring that forth. It is our yoke, okay, to bring forth this kingdom and to lead the world into righteousness and truth and justice and love and peace and compassion. This is what we are to do. Cultural forms and expressions are ever changing and evolving, and never once and for all. At the same time, cultural values and principles can stand the test of time, Torah, especially when consciously understood by the people. This is an important concept to understand, especially for an oppressed people. This is why Torah is always just reiterated time and time again throughout Scripture. Remember, observe, guard, keep, return, repent, turn back to Torah in Mashiach. This is essential for oppressed people to understand. What is it again? I'm going to read it. The cultural values and principles can stand the test of time, especially when consciously understood by the people. We have to understand our culture. Sometimes cultural forms born out of the African people's legitimate struggle for self-determination and resistance against oppressive social economic conditions have been captured and redirected by the people's very enemy and used against the people, all while promoting as being of the people. For example, revolutionary African music like the conscious hip-hops and roots reggae born in the 60s and 70s have today been perverted into trap music, gangster rap, or gutter dancehall in order to twist the thinking of the African the youth along the lines of self-hate, degradation of women, and other self-destructive behaviors. Kwame Nkrumah, in his book Conscientism, talked about the cluster of humanist principles which underlie the tradition of African society. While there is scientifically both positive and negative within everything in nature and people, the revolutionary culture of which we speak seeks to focus on promoting and magnifying the most positive elements of the culture. In reference to the African masses, there must be political organization, not mobilization. It doesn't say nothing about just going out and marching and protesting and boycotting haphazardly. No, we must be politically organized so that the people actively who belong to our group, in order to make those positive elements become dominant within the society over time. Some of the positive principles within traditional African culture include collectivism, egalitarianism, and humanism. All of these are principles of Torah. While some of these cultural elements may be more dominant in certain African societies now more than others, we can still find them to one degree or another within all African societies worldwide. With concerted and sustained efforts, these values can become once again elevated to a position of dominance in the African world or amongst African people. Now, African cultural revolution. Let's deal with this. Currently, African society and African people are being oppressed by a socio-economic system commonly referred to as capitalism, which is at its height known as imperialism. Okay, so this imperialism is based on a hate and contempt of all things African and exploitative of all things African in order to position the imperialist power into a seat of rulership and dominance. What this system is doing, yes indeed, all that is white supremacy. Besides exploiting the majority of people throughout the world for the benefit of a small few, is preventing African people from fully practicing our culture. We live in a society in America for those who are in the captivity in the diaspora, where our culture is not at all, or excuse me, the environment for our culture is not conducive. However, going back to the land of our ancestors, in the land of Israel, though it is a secular political state, it is still more conducive and functional to allow you to practice Torah. And we have to understand that. And then we have to purify and cleanse that and bring that to its height in order for the world to see the light that we are to be to the rest of the nations. So even if collectivism, egalitarianism, and humanism are practiced inside the home of the village or the village, when our children go to school, they are pitted against each other as competitors. When we go to the workplace, our people toil while those who do little or nothing are the main beneficiaries of the wealth produced. Workers are trained to sabotage their co-workers, fostering disunity and mistrust within their ranks, all for the maintenance of the capitalist system that is against the collective well-being of all the workers, because it is exploitative by nature. Land tenure within traditional African cultural systems treated land and property as collectively owned elements. So this is what the Yobel was all about, the Jubilee, okay? The year of release, okay? This is what that is all about. And these were to be accessible and utilized by the entire community. This system sought to ensure an equitable distribution of wealth and the economic security for all citizens. We see this with the disciples in the book of Acts, when all things were sold by the community, brought to the disciples' feet, and were distributed as was needed. This was socialism without the label. This was collectivism without the label. Okay? This was just the practice of our culture. All right? The systems of feudalism, which developed in certain parts of Africa, and later capitalism, which was imposed on Africa by invading armies and governments from Europe, completely overturned our traditional land tenure systems. This impacted all aspects of our society's development. Shabbat shalom to you and yours, Ima Yapa. Welcome to all who've also entered into the room. M70 just posted the link that we're reading from. We're beneath the picture of the farmer in Kenya. People without land cannot produce for themselves. They can't even have freedom. There's no freedom. That is also an erroneous statement. The word Africa comes from the word Afrin, which was one of Abraham's sons. Okay? So let's please stop making these egregious errors and these statements without having understanding. Have you read From Babylon to Timbuktu, Yonatan? Because if you've read it, then you've seen even Professor Rudolph Windsor state that. Go back and reread From Babylon to Timbuktu, please. Because all your errors in this One West doctrine that you're talking about, this anti-Hamitic doctrine that comes from Abba Bivens in his school, needs to be exposed and ceased. Stop it. It unnerves me beyond almost anything about us when we bring this nonsense onto the table. Stop it. That is a recent doctrine. Our ancestors, Josiah Arnold Ford, Matthew Wentworth, all these rabbis from back in the day were Pan-African. They were Ethiopian. They even called themselves Ethiopians. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Continuing on. I'm going to go back to the first sentence. People without land cannot produce for themselves or determine how the land is to be used or for whose benefit. The people consequently do not have control over the distribution system to ensure what is produced is equitably distributed amongst the collective. The ultimate purpose and challenge of the African Cultural Revolution is to create a new society where our revolutionary African cultural values reign supreme, not only in the household or on the village level, but in the local and national governments, the workplace, religious centers, and educational institutions. In short, every component part of our society. The African Cultural Revolution must seek to transform the way labor is organized. It must transform the way land and resources are allocated and utilized. It must transform how people interact, socialize, and resolve conflicts. among themselves. Told out for posting that, Moray M70. Please go in that book and read that, Yonatan. It is wrong because it's error. It is absolute error. It is a recent novelty to divide our people by these agent alphabet organizations, GOCC, GMS, IUIC. All these are 501c3 funded. Who are they getting their funds from? Who is funding them? That's the question. Because where their funds come from is where their doctrines come from. If someone's paying you, you better be doing something that they telling you to do, or else you ain't gonna get no funds. Period. It's wrong. It's dead wrong. And it's not because you don't agree, it's an erroneous principle. We are African people at root. We come from South Africa. Our ancestors come from Africa. They are African. They are Bantus. They are Bantu. Well, you must be a European then. Are you European? You must be European, Danielle. Okay, then you're an African. I'm an Israelite too, brother. And I recognize my African roots, unlike some of us who have no connection to our roots. Woo! So, again, this can only be done through organized class struggle. Class struggle is required because within society, regardless of the most beautiful desires of the majority of the people for peace and justice, there exists a class of selfish minority interests, both indigenous to our society and foreign to it, that are organized and bent on maintaining systems of privilege and exploitation currently bleeding the entire world dry. And I will say this, if you don't agree, you don't have to be here. This goes to Yonatan, this goes to Danielle. If you don't feel what we talk about Africa and our connection to Africa and our ancestry as Israelites to Africa, you don't have to stay. It's simple as that. Hiding from the struggle is a non-option. So some segments of our society which advocate a return to practicing elements of traditional African culture, whether communal style cooperatives, organic farming communities, homeschooling environments as examples, may think this can be done in simple isolation, away from both the African masses and the internal and external exploiters of the people. But this is an unlikely possibility based on the laws of capitalist demand. Who are the Natufians, Jonathan? Capitalism knows no bounds and accepts nothing but total control and monopoly over the world's resources, markets, and labor. This is reflected in the intensified gentrification initiatives and global land grabs going on throughout every corner of the world. I'm just going to type this word in for you to look up, because I'm assuming you've never heard of this word before, these people. This is reflected in capitalist governments proposing and enacting laws which restrict the use of rainwater for personal domestic use in home gardens. All right. That makes my blood boil, so I can't help it. Please forgive me. So this is all done while protecting the rights of capitalist corporate farms to use rainwater without restrictions. So let's take another example of this, right? You look at what they call the Somalian pirates, right? Those who were in the waters and were, hijacking other ships of these companies and everything. The reason that they were doing that is because these companies, these supranational organizations, were known to dump radioactive water and other waste into the waters on the shores of Somalia. So these people were like, look, we got to defend ours. So they got called pirates for protecting their homeland and the shores of their country so that they don't get all this poison and toxic waste on their shores. So capitalism will demonize and use their power and their wealth and resources, which they have accumulated in a mass through exploitative and even murderous genocidal campaigns, to go about establishing their power and their hegemony. Okay, so when we respond, and I don't mean react, when we respond in kind, we become the terrorists. So it's like you're calling the people in Iraq and Afghanistan terrorists for fighting for their land. What makes you a terrorist for fighting for your land? This is my cultural ancestry. This is my historical, you know, land and home. So I'm a terrorist for fighting for what I believe is my land and what I know and what I have been affixed to for millennia and generations. Okay, that's capitalism, though. So continuing on, the only way to return to full and complete victory of revolutionary African cultural values is for our people to become active and organized agents against the system of capitalism and worldwide imperialism, which by its nature seeks to impose a foreign and anti-human culture on the very people that it seeks to subjugate and exploit. There can be no peaceful coexistence side by side between capitalism and its positive alternative, socialism. Socialism, labeling, is the social economic system that must and will come into existence as a result of the victory of the African cultural revolution. Okay. At times, it is their intent to transform us to violence. Very much so. They provoke us. They're very provocative. Okay. This is what the agent provocateurs are even for. Okay. They they've put guns in Chicago and South Central Los Angeles and mixed it with drugs so that they can see the project unfold. So very much so. Cultural expression must be in alignment and advance the cultural revolution, not separate from it. For our part, the AAPRP is attempting to play its humble role in this giant effort. It would behoove us to look at the scientific processes that the AAPRP is taking in order to bring forth liberation and self determination. Now, the beautiful thing about the AAPRP is that it derives from Kwame Nkrumah and Ahmed Sekou Touré of Guinea Bissau, and that these were countries that were liberated with these principles, these practices, this culture that they embraced. Okay, so unlike the UNIA, who had great, I'm not saying just discard the UNIA. This is the UNIA. The AAPRP is the UNIA. But what I'm saying is the AAPRP proved and demonstrated, much like Ben Ami and the other Israelites who repatriated, how to practice this cultural revolution. Okay, so we have to respect everything that Ben Ami Ben Yehuda has done in leading his people to the continent of Africa and causing them to establish a community, a self-sustaining community. Not perfect, but establishing a presence in a community that they can call their own and sustain themselves without outside influence. Continuing on. So our party is working to build political structures which span the entire African world, both in Africa and in the African diaspora, called work study circles. You study to show yourself approved and to educate yourself in order to inform your actions, your work, so that you can bring forth this reality. Now, what was I going to say? I had a thought. No one denies that. That's Africa, though. There are small groups of 3 to 13 people which study a common curriculum of African history, culture, philosophy, and current events. So there is a shared and an affinity, a shared stream of consciousness and an affinity that our culture has with the AAPRP, and that work study is crucial. This is what our whole paradigm is as far as bringing forth the kingdom. That's what I was going to say. The reality that Israel is to bring forth is a political reality. It is a geopolitical reality. It is a kingdom that we are to bring forth. It is not a religion. It is not some sort of divisive paradigm. It is a unifying paradigm to bring the earth under the sovereignty of our king, who will be crowned as Yahushua ben Dawid, Mashiach ben Dawid. Okay, so this is what we have to understand. Our work is political in nature. And what does political mean? It is the art of relating with others. Okay? Because here's something think about Jonathan and Daniel, we have to relate to the Hamites to bring them into the kingdom. The world's going to be under the whole jurisdiction of Zion. So we have to relate to these Hamites that you have such ambivalence and seeming antagonist sentiments about, which I don't understand for the life of me. Continuing going. We seek to organize these circles into revolutionary production units designed to help lay the foundation of a new, revolutionary, and truly direct democratic African society. I don't mean democratic and just representative. I mean direct. Everybody's voice, everybody's um, perspective is important and counts. We seek to study and practice so that we can both understand and solve the problems of the present and into the future. We seek to utilize the gifts of the value systems passed down to us by our ancestors, coupled with organizational techniques, science, and technology of today. As we work to build this revolutionary society, we are seeking additional builders to help us side by side, such as you. We invite you to join or to become a supporter of the AAPRP today. Now, I'm not promoting that so much. I just wanted to present the principles there. I think it is a very, very progressive group. I believe that it is composed, I don't believe, I know it is composed of Israelites in this particular organization and other African peoples. Okay? Islamic. There are even Christians. There's even African Buddhists who are Pan Africans. Now, I'm not saying you subscribe to those ideologies and those particular traditions, but what we're seeing is a unification of African people in the aims of bringing forth an African reality that is established in justice, in truth, in righteousness, okay? In love, in peace. That's a society I work for with anyone, as long as you don't infringe on my rights. Never heard some speak so hard against Europe as some do about Africa. Our brothers, they gather ground. Exactly. It's interesting, Elder. Got a couple more articles. This next one is also by the AAPRP, and I find it very pertinent to our particular dimension and what we present to this paradigm of liberation and so on and so forth. And this is entitled The Revolutionary Harmony Between Religion and Revolution. Because in the conscious community today, there are people and schools of thought that are stating that there is some sort of contradiction between religion and revolution. And when I say religion, of course, I mean that in cultural practice of spirituality. And that is inherently and intrinsically an African principle. Spirituality is inherently and originally an African expression of our culture. Okay? And so when you have African people who are denouncing religion and speaking against religion and saying that there's no place for religion in revolution, well, let's see what the first independent president, the president of the first independent country from colonialism had to say about that, Kwame Nkrumah. I see him. Oh my goodness, that ain't no lie. They do look more Hamite than Hamites themselves. Right, that's nothing but self-hate, man. That's hilarious. They look more Hamite by themselves. Oh my goodness. Let me get this article cracking. Give me some fours when you all acknowledge the receipt of this article, please, and thank you. Man, that was some funny stuff. Oh my goodness. Again, harmony between religion slash spirituality and revolution. This is crucial because this is where Israel's unique gift and unique role in Pan African unity comes into the fold. We are the harbingers. We are the uh, beacons of light that will bring this reality forward. All right. I see some. We got some Jehovah's Witnesses. This got out the car. Lucky I'm online. Excuse me 1 second. Hey, y'all, there's some Jehovah's Witnesses that just got out the car. Just FYI, okay? Sonny? All right. Here we go. From Nkrumahism to Rayism, a revolutionary ideology coming from African culture. There is and cannot be any contradiction between religion and revolution. There cannot be, okay, in the ideology coming from African culture. In fact, religion and revolution, spirituality are in harmony and are complementary aspects of culture. Religion and spirituality are dominant features of the African personality. Nkrumah points out that the traditional face of Africa includes an attitude towards man which can only be described in its social manifestation as being socialist. This arises from the fact that man is regarded in Africa as primarily a spiritual being, a being endowed originally with a certain inward dignity and value. And this is the source of revolutionary love. Spirituality is, in fact, the catalyst to spark that love of the people, to bring forth good and whole and pure change. This is the source of that. Steph Curry don't look like no Gentile. You must have never seen the diversity of the phenotypes in the African continent, Brother Yonatan. There's people who are albinos even. But guess what? They African. They don't look like Gentiles. Gentiles look like mutants. They're mutated Africans. If you really want to be technical, the YT gene from the original XY gene is a mutation. A recessive gene. I digress. For African people, there is essential harmony in our faith in the Creator and the African Revolution. There is harmony in our faith in the Creator and the African Revolution. Okay? To fulfill our obligations to our religion or spirituality, we have an obligation to properly serve one another. This is where the revolutionary love comes from. We have to be people-centered. Okay? Yah's humanity is Yah's highest creation. Man and woman, the true servants of the Most High, and the people have the duty to fight for the liberation of those deprived of liberty when and wherever whether an individual or a people. M70, please post for me Isaiah 61, verse 1. You want to see revolution in religion at its peak. Isaiah 61 through 3, more M70, if you don't mind, please and thank you. So listen to this. This is the essential connection of what liberation is about. It reads as follows. The spirit of the master Yah is upon me, because Yah has anointed me to bring good news to the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, that's liberty, people, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yah, and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn, to appoint unto those who mourn in Sion, to give them embellishment for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. And they shall be called trees of righteousness, a planting of Yahuwah, Baruch Hashem, to be adorned. That is revolutionary. That is the essence of spirituality and revolution right there. It is to reverse the injustices and the oppression that is on the earth, which is all that Israel is concerned. We call it two words, and I'm going to type it in for you right here. It is called social justice, people. Our responsibility is to bring social justice with Torah to society. Continuing on. Revolution is the collective action, listen to this, and struggle of an oppressed people guided and supported by a consciously planned process, which is ideology, and determination to qualitatively change an old, backward, and oppressive political economic condition known as capitalism to a new progressive and just system that will work for the people's interest, which they identify as socialism or collectivism. We don't need these labels, though. These are just labels and titles. We just need to put our work into action. Religion is a set of beliefs and principles that affirm the existence of one or more supreme beings. We affirm one, which governs us all. This is the true ruler of all. And we know that Yahuwah, being the creator of heaven, earth, sea, and all that is in them, is the King of kings. Religion influences and motivates social behavior in the sense that it serves as a moral guide and provides reassurance to people that in spite of what may seem to be an overwhelmingly negative situation, through practice of religion and serving the Most High, peace, justice, and prosperity will prevail. Through the practice of religion and serving Yah, peace, justice, and prosperity will prevail. All we got to do is serve Yah and one another. The two greatest commandments. What are the two greatest commandments in Scripture? Type those in, please. What are the two greatest commandments in Scripture? This is revolutionary in and of itself because it's not happening. The world is backwards. The world is oppressive. The world has no place for this. What are the two greatest commandments? Someone type those in, please, and thank you. Love the Most High with all your heart and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the revolution right there. Y'all want the revolution? Do these two things here, and the revolution will come. Okay, that's the revolution. Continuing on. Religion holds respect for human dignity and human virtue. Religion can also man's existence onto the next world, the Olam Haba, the age to come, and reserves for a future world positive or negative existence according to their life conduct in this world. However, as Sekou Touré, a revolutionary Muslim, points out, the revolution does not intend to deny this future world. It only wishes that the struggle against evil be not deferred or postponed. And this is actually what all sincere believers and the dispossessed, regardless of race, sex, and nationality, are pressing for. Now, unfortunately, for many of us in North America, and we're colonized with the European expression of Christianity, we were told to wait for everything in the great by and by. We'll get our pie in the sky in the great by and by, as opposed to understand. And that was to pacify us. That was so that we would not realize that our life now in the kingdom of heaven can be here now. And we have the responsibility to establish that now. Okay? And so when the capitalist leaders and powers and criminals went about colonizing us, they made it intention. Their intention was to make us not look at it as a pressing reality. Just as Ahmed Sekou Touré was talking about, we started postponing it. More of us did than didn't. Harriet Tubman was one who didn't. Gabriel Prosser was one who didn't. David Walker was one who didn't. Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, of course, were those who didn't wait. They seized the time. Okay? And they went about bringing forth the kingdom, even if they had to be martyred. We're going to see some things about that shortly as well from the book of Revelation. Continuing on, both revolution and religion share common values, which they want people to reflect, and even more, they want people to become the uncompromising and faithful advocates of. That is the key. Believing is one thing, becoming is everything. Listen to me. Believing in something is one thing, but becoming is everything as relates to religion. I'm going to read that sentence one more time. Both revolution and religion share common values which they want people to reflect. As we know, Yah has his image and likeness. And even more, they want people to become the uncompromising and faithful advocates of. This is Torah language. This is the Torah. We're reading Torah, basically. Not saying literally, but we're reading instructions in the spirit of, in the principles of Torah. Some of these values are justice, peace, freedom for mankind, the nation, and the laboring masses. Revolution and religion proclaim, organize, and conduct a permanent struggle, a universal struggle, which is class struggle, the clash between antagonistic interests represented by classes that are opposed in the process of production, distribution, and utilization of goods. And again, when we go back to land tenure and we look at how we were egalitarian, that no one owned the land, okay, which is what capitalism brought into with the ownership society. We took care of one another. We made sure that the hungry would not go without food. So we didn't glean the corners of our crops. So anything that fell from when we brought in our harvest and it dropped on the floor, we didn't go back and pick it up. We left that for the wayfarer and for the hungry and for the poor. And we made sure that there was no amongst us. Scripture says that this is Torah. This is an instruction, a commandment even, to make sure that there is no poor amongst us, because what that creates is crime. And what crime creates is disorder. And what disorder creates is more sin. And what sin creates is death. And this is what Torah is completely against. The Torah is about life. What we're dealing with in society is death. And what the capitalist society and the imperialist society has created is death and destruction. We, the righteous, the light, the children of light, have to bring forth life. Okay? Continuing on. So while for the latter, this is spirituality, it is a struggle between good and evil. Good embodying truth, justice and beauty, and evil embodying exploitation, lies, oppression, in essence, all that is contrary to the good. Suffering, sweat, and sacrifice are considered by both revolution and religion as necessary and ongoing on the long road to freedom. An important part of religion and revolution involves the unity of the philosophy and the behavior it advocates. Crucial. This is compatibility at its highest and finest expression in revolution and religion. In other words, not only is there a constant struggle for the honest adherence of both revolution and religion to live up to the principles of each, but both revolution and religion have also been misused by corrupt men and women as a tool of exploitation and oppression. Hence, we judge revolution and religion primarily by its principles, not necessarily its adherents. We know that our people's faith and belief in righteousness and justice, which is upheld by their religious and spiritual faith, must reinforce the need to engage in revolutionary political activity to defeat the enemies of Yah and the people on earth. The essential harmony of revolution and religion can only be affirmed in the struggle to build a just society. There is currently no content classified with this term. So, again, how revolutionary love overcomes imperialist hate. The love of Yah with all of our being, and the love of our neighbor as ourselves is how we overcome. There's no greater force on earth than love in spirit and in truth. And it is our responsibility as Israelites to bring forth this reality. I think I'm just going to read one more article and then get into some scripture. This is an article dedicated to Jonathan and Danielle. It's called Dear African, Love Thyself. Dedicated to my brothers, anti-Hamites, One West doctrine espousers, to all One West espousers. I sense your sarcasm, Danielle, but I sincerely dedicate this to you. Love yourself, brother. Love your African heritage. Know your African heritage. Israel just didn't pop up out of nowhere. Adam just didn't come from literal dust. You see what I'm saying? The dust of the earth that Adam came from was from the Natufian people who were Bantu. They were Afro-Asiatic. That's where the Afro-Asiatic from, the Bantus. Do your research on linguistics, and the branch of language of the Afro-Asiatic tongue. See where it goes back to. What's the root of it? And you'll see that it's Bantufian. It's Bantu. And you'll see the cognates that the Hausa language, the Bantu language even shares with Hebrew because they come from the same people. Lino Sigoite says, as much as we complain about outsiders exoticizing our cultures for financial gain, sometimes our complacency has laid the groundwork for it. I love my roots. This is what Malcolm was talking about. You can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. So the contempt, the disdain that we express for Africa and for African people is demonstrative of our hate for ourselves. And this is something we have to understand. It is to our strength to be of a Pan-African perspective, as M70 again said, how you look, how you see things. What's your perspective? Because that perspective will do more harm for us at the end of the day than it will for good. And this is what behooves me. I'm going to go back to this One West doctrine of the anti-Hamite doctrine. We're quick to call mongrelized Puerto Ricans, mongrelized Native Americans our brothers. But we will reject the African quicker than we touch something that's hot. What in the world is that? What in the world is that? This 12 erroneous, the elders who even dealt with Abba Bivens, who dealt with the 12 tribes chart that is used by these One West doctrine espousers, have blatantly said on camera, you can go on YouTube and see the elders that walk with Abba Bivens say that was a ploy to recruit people. It is a lie. It is not true. The 12 tribes chart has no foundational credibility. It is not based in veracity. It is not based in truth. It is what he thought based on his conjecture. He conjectured this into existence. He didn't study this into existence. So when you see these 12 tribes charts, it's just conjecture. It's not true. It's not true. Exactly. That's all it is, Elder Judah. We have to deal with history. We have to deal with reality. We have to see the Israelite kingdoms in Africa and the Africans that actually flocked to us long before the Europeans and the Arabs came and started trading us, because we were considered strangers as far as not indigenous to that part of Africa, but we were in Africa. But I digress. Let me get back to this. When I first read up on the story of Lesotho, it was in books written by European settlers and missionaries. The same is true when my research extended to other African countries. In retrospect, it is easy to see and understand why this was the case. Before the arrival of these travelers from the north, our history was for the most part documented orally. And we see so many allegiances with Africa in the scriptures. We see so many even flights into Africa. Why did we flee into Africa so much? Whenever there was some troubles going on in Israel, Northeast Africa, why did we go deeper south into Africa? Why? Because they are our family. That's our brothers and our cousins and our family, our extended family. Come on, man. So this was documented orally, but it was still unsettling to discover irregularities in what certain symbols were said to mean and the way in which certain cultural aspects were misrepresented. When most look into the mirror of life, they hate what they see about self. Thus, in our inner spirit, when we see Africans, we are reminded of what they have always shown us ignorance. Right. We're ambivalent to Africa because of what mind job they did to us about Africa. We're quicker to accept someone calling us a nigger than we are someone calling us African. If someone called me African, I embrace that because I know Pan-Africa is huge. It goes over again into Mesopotamia. Indus Kush was over there. It goes into India. It goes into Japan. If you want to be serious, it goes to the Far East because our ancestors were over there first. A true shogun has African blood in it. This is what the Japanese even say. He got black blood. The first dynasty of China, the Shang dynasty, was African. We everywhere. Now, as far as Israel, we got to understand, yes, we do have a unique culture, but that don't make us like, what's the word I'm looking for? Better than the next person. We're servants. We got to go out to these other nations and show them Yah and bring them into the kingdom. Man, 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 Elder. Ridiculous. Let me get back to this article. This is in addition to the blatantly offensive language used to describe African natives, just as we're talking about. Despite all this, it strikes me as odd that we still consider information about our cultures more interesting when it is told to us by the other, on the outside looking in. We wait for our uniqueness to be given status and prestige by our melanin deficient brothers and sisters in order for us to sit up and pay attention. The depth of this is evident in the number of people who blow up and start gaining unprecedented recognition only once they have been endorsed by Western institutions such as magazines, critics, prizes. As much as we complain about outsiders exoticizing our culture for financial gain, sometimes our complacency has laid the groundwork for it. Too often, only when we realize that outsiders are positioning themselves as having discovered something beautiful about our continent do we sit up and take notice. Yet many of us do not possess the same curiosity and fascination to explore our continent. There's more African people that would want to go on vacation, quote unquote, or on a world tour to Europe than to Africa. And that blows my mind. That blows my mind absolutely. Well, so if you were to go somewhere out of the country, where would you want to go? I don't know, maybe someplace like Italy or maybe like Spain, Greece, Paris. You know, nigga, you you black, you are African. Go see what beauty the continent holds. You see what I'm saying? This is the cognitive dissonance M70 had spoke of earlier that we suffer from. The truth can be presented plain as day, but we just start shaking and convulsing when it's presented and we reject it because we think it's not good for us, not knowing that shaking and convulsions that we're going through is a shock to our system because of everything that white supremacy has put in us. This is a remedy. And remedies sometimes can cause violent reactions to the dis-ease that you are suffering from. My aunt, for instance, may she rest in peace, died of cancer when she started taking some of the natural remedies. You know, it made her feel bad. She felt bad, but it had to go and counteract against the poison that they had put into her that made her feel even worse. That's a very blanket statement, Jonathan. And I don't find that true across the board at all. At all. So too often when we realize that outsiders are positioning themselves as having discovered something beautiful about our continent, do we sit up and take notice? Yet many of us do not possess the same curiosity and fascination to explore our continent. How many people brag about the number of European countries they have been to, but do not take the time to discover their own backyards because they find it less captivating? It's time that we shifted our interests by towards learning about our cultural heritage and wealth instead of taking pride in our enrichment of the tourism sectors of the West, making something out of nothing. The fact that nationals from other parts of the world are migrating to and settling on our continent should be an indication that there is something magical about Africa. Sure, poverty, illness, and corrupt governments are ever present, but there is life here. Africans manage to make amazing things happen with very limited resources. There was a boy in Africa, as a matter of fact, speaking on this, who built windmills off of scrap metal to empower his village. He built windmills to power his village out of scrap metal. He had other dudes, another young man, boy, not even a teenager, I don't think, who was building radios from trash. You got dudes making shoes from tires. You got people making cars from wood. You got people who build drums from wood. And I mean, just unimaginable things, because why? Necessity is the mother of invention. And there's no more creative people on earth than African people. Exactly. Akon lighten up everything in Africa. All praise to the Most High. So here's a question: if one man is doing all that in Africa, what these organizations been doing? What have these Red Cross and these Peace Corps and these other organizations doing in Africa? Huh? Exactly. A quarter a day can feed 5 families. A quarter? For real? Where you get that at? Because y'all pocketed all kinds of money. I don't give any money to those damn thieves. Not a penny at all. I will send it to someone who I may know, who knows people over there, but I'm not sending it to no damn organization. You can best believe that. Continuing going. For example, there is no government-funded housing in Lesotho, yet everyone has a home, regardless of how poor they are. Kids have to travel unforgivable distances to get to school, yet they manage to persevere and make something of themselves. While people elsewhere rely on generational wealth and privilege, we channel our creativity to make our lives comfortable and our survival possible. That's right. Make lemonade out of lemons. Exactly. I don't eat them, but we make chitlins out of guts. You see what I'm saying? That's a horrible analogy because that's just the worst thing to eat. But we find a way out of no way with our creativity. We find a way out of no way. You know that was a horrible analogy. But the point is, again, we find a way with Yah in us, especially. And when Yah makes the way for us, ain't no one closing that door. Again, so we know how to make something out of nothing. To this day, narratives about Africa come from elsewhere, still tend to be typical, but the current generation of thinkers and doers from the continent are disproving these preconceived notions. Here's my question. Not all of Africa, brother. There's tribes that are responsible for that. And tribes have even apologized for that and sought to make restitution by opening the doors to African Americans, such as Zimbabwe, but they weren't involved in that. But Ghana was a stronghold of Israelite kingdoms. And they apologized, and now they're opening the doors to African Americans to come home. Okay? But my question is this about, he just talking about how so many Africans from the continent are coming and disproving these preconceived notions. Who has the highest GPA in post-secondary education in America? What ethnic group has the highest GPA in college amongst Americans? Exactly. The most astute students come from Africa, not Asia, not Chinese. No, Africans. Period. They have the highest GPAs. Excuse me, our brothers have the highest GPAs. I'm going to say they because I'm not separating myself from the Africans like some people want to do. And if you want to be technical about that statement, Yonatan, we still being punished for our disobedience to Yah by the Gentiles. Real talk. So you can point fingers, yeah, you wrong, you wrong, you wrong. But why did they sell us in the first place? How did they go about selling us in the first place? How did we get to that part of the world in the first place? Answer that, Yonatan. How did we get to that part of the world to get sold in the first place? Huh? That's not my question. How did we get into Africa in order to get sold by certain African tribes? Hmm? No, not when, how? In 70 AD, post 70. Why did they sell us? Why did they sell us? Why did we get kicked out of our home in 70? Huh? Why did we get punished? Hello? Thank you, Yapa. You don't want to deal with the facts and the hardcore reality. You trying to just make all this other stuff sensational. Look at yourself. Okay, I got you. I'm gonna finish this article and I'm gonna open up the mic. I'm gonna do that. How about that? I got a video to play, by the way, too. Here we go. So while most Western media outlets offer little or no factual background about the African condition, except for third-hand information by people who are not intimately acquainted with our lived experience, there's a rising number of Africans who are committed to telling authentic African stories and owning their Africans. They are young innovators who are creating and making great strides in industries that were previously exclusive to the West, such as film, fashion, science, engineering, and communications technology. The beautiful thing about Renaissance is that its core principles embrace the collectivist ethos that African societies are founded on. We are slowly undoing the divide and conquer approach that was used to dismantle the sense of solidarity we could achieve regardless of our diversity. Continuing going, you can see some solar panels on these homes. Akon, I think, is responsible for that there. We're getting that all going. Yes, indeed, Yahuda one. Looking within and taking pride. Africa is waking up, but to be fully conscious, we need to start taking pride in our identity, the road we have traveled to get here, and the power we have intellectually and otherwise. We must abandon our dependence on outsiders to qualify us as good enough. We need to be the ones setting the standards for what we produce, consume, and share with the world. This awakening will not happen overnight, but it begins with us breaking down distortions and the tremendous amount of ignorance that informs how we, here's this word again, perceive ourselves. What is our perception of ourselves? We need to recognize that we have all the tools we need to be self-sufficient. By appreciating our own beauty, potential, and strength, we will stop looking to the West to validate our experiences, be they good or bad. The difference between us and non-Africans is that others look within to solve their problems and set their own standards, while we would rather doubt than trust our own. We need to love ourselves wholly as a people and as manifestations of light. Again, the name of this presentation, we are at war. Revolutionary love overcomes imperialist hate. I want to give you all this link. And then I'm going to play this video. I'm going to open it up. This is the link right here. You can access. This is an excerpt from the movie The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Great movie. Rest in peace to, I forgot my man's name who actually wrote it. The book passed last year. This is an excerpt from that great piece of literature, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. This is brother Dan Freeman talking to one of his comrades in the revolution that took place in Chicago. One second, if you don't mind. But definitely, I want to open the mic up in response to this presentation, this offering, and have some dialogue. I think that's necessary. It's most necessary. All right. Here we go. Be moving slow in the mug. Yeah, there it goes. Sam Greenlee. Toda. It's going to take more than hate of our oppressors to overcome and to win in this war that is being waged against us. It's going to take love of freedom, love of your neighbor, and love of the Most High to make this reality come forth. This is the only way that we will ever experience unity, liberation, and self determination. There's no other way outside of the principle and force of love. Love for truth, love of justice, the love of righteousness, the love of peace. These are the principles that we have to have internalized in order for this reality to become externalized and manifest. And I said I was going to have some scripture, but I think I'm going to go ahead and hold off on scripture and deal more with an open mic, a little Q&A, or a little dialogue and discussion, so that some of the issues that came up during this presentation are able to be hashed out at least. It may not come to some sort of consensus or agreement, but perhaps we can come to some sort of understanding and reconcile our understandings. So I want to thank you all for dealing with me today in the time wise and as far as my distractions and deviations from my proposed path of expressly dealing with we are at war, how revolutionary love overcomes imperialist hate. All praise is given to the Most High for anything that has come out of my mouth that has been true, that has edified you and enhanced your understanding of what we need to do to overcome our enemies and what we need to do to establish Yah's sovereignty on earth. So, indeed, all praise to the Most High. If there has been any error, I do ask as always for us to deal with that. Let's wrestle with these issues and these concepts so that we can come to the truth. The truth is the only thing that's going to set us free. So Are we African or are we not? Is that true? What's the truth of that? So we need to deal with these things to understand the greater whole of this reality. Hallelujah. Toda Rabbah. And so with that, I'm going to close out with a Hatzi Kaddish. The mic will be open. Um, we can go forward from there. So with that, Yikadal Vayikadesh, Shemay Rabbah, Biamadi Barak Herote, Vayimilich Malkute, Bachayichunu Vyamichunu Vchaye, Kobei Israel Bagala, Uvizman Kari, Vimeru. Amen. Yeheshmei Rabba Mavorach, Leolam Ulme Almaya. Yit Barak Vayishtabach, Vayipa'ar Vayiromam, Vayiknase. Vayitadar, Vayitale, Vayitalal, Shemay Dekudashah, Berechu. Yela Min Kol Barakata, Vashirata, Tush Bechata, Vanechmata. Amiran Ba'alma, B'Shem Mashiach, Yahoshua, Baruch Hashem, Hallelujah, V'Meru, Amen. So with that, I relinquish the mic. Shabbat Shalom.